What a great trailer. Still feel the blood pounding after the 18th time I've seen that trailer. Okay, our next panel is called Sourcing for New Business Models in Media Financing. And for that, we have Abi Rastogi from 108 Media, Justin Damon from Aurora Global Media Capital, Martin McCord from London Pacific Finance, and Sherman Ng from Salt Media and Entertainment. And we are welcoming back Leon Tan from Dragon Slate Media.
Hi everyone, I'm here to torture you again. Today we're going to talk about something that's on the back of every producer's mind and every investor's mind, is finding the right financial model in order to power our industry forward. Now, I guess traditionally when we try to raise financing to make a film or television series or new media, there's of course, there's those of us who are, had the advantage of having governments offer grants and incentives and so forth. That's one. There's also the, if you're lucky, the distribution advance that's given to you. If you're even luckier, you'll have investors who are interested in financing your film. But all these things are not really reliable in some ways, and certainly not predictable. And we would like to see if there's a way in this session to share ideas as to what form of fundraising and financing in a stable way we can achieve this, can be done in order to make media intellectual property like we do today. Also, we've noticed the emergence of what have been traditional investors like PE firms, like venture capitalists, traditional kinds of financing that are now very interested in our industry as it increases in profile and so forth. And how do they fit into a world which is really, really unpredictable compared to some of the investments they've made before, certainly in other industries. I have here with me Martin McCord from London Pacific Finance, two very, very brave investors. There's Sherman from Salt Media, Justin, we all know, from Aurora, and Abi Rastogi, who I believe ran a production finance company in Canada and has since relocated to Asia, simply because this is where the action is, right guys? Right? Yeah, so let's start with Abi. Okay, you ran, is it 108 Media?
Yeah, the company 108 Media.
Yeah, and
right.
I remember meeting you 2 years ago at Hong Kong Film Art. You were very much ensconced in Canada, and 2 years later, you're here in Asia.
Yeah, so
let's talk about your model.
Sure, the company 108 I founded about 5 years ago, and the business that was of financing and packaging, of course, film and television content for the global marketplace. You know, the company's been around. We've done fairly well. We've backed, I think, about 100 films, independent films. I've been looking at Asia for about past 3 years. I've done about 30 trips in the last 3 years. And eventually I found the action was here. You know, fantastic content is being produced. Is it being distributed globally? I'm not so sure. Have I had success doing so? Quite a few times. We've taken films called Yasmin from Brunei. That was the first film out of Brunei after 60 years, and we got it licensed to over 30 countries to people like HBO in Eastern Europe and major channels like AMC in the US. So we've had success taking Asian-backed content to the global marketplace. The reason I relocated here is that, I think there's a lot of financing opportunities that I'm sure, people on the panel here and so on. What we wanted to do was see if we can take our global expertise and combine that with the financial expertise and the talent that's available here, and to see if there is a viable ecosystem that does exist. So for me, all this challenge has been is Asia has fantastic stories. They get licensed to LA, then LA comes back to Asia looking for money, then it goes back to LA, and then LA sells it back to Asia. I thought, what if we could cut down a few of those circles and, produced in Asia, financed in Asia, sold out of Asia for the global marketplace, and that's why I'm here.
So, in the context of picking the right projects and evaluating whether you get a return and all that kind of stuff, what is your model that you apply
Sure.
when you do these things? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the guiding principle of every model that we looked at is follow two rules. First rule is never lose money, and rule number two is never forget rule number one, right? That's how you start. But I think the guiding principle is not about finding the right film most of the time. The initial first step is making sure you don't pick up the wrong film. So we start from the process of rejection rather than from a process of acceptance. But a lot of things that we're looking at are, it's not a direct science, but I would call it kind of is an alchemy for us, where we look at the components where, is the script something that speaks to the global marketplace? Is this something that probably people in 50 countries would want to see? Or is it a very regional story? If it's a regional story, the regional budgets probably satisfy that. If it's something that's global, that can travel, then that's something you want to put a little bit more ammo behind it, is what I say. I'm not going to get into, everybody wants an A-list star. I mean, I wouldn't say no if Brad Pitt called up and said, we want to be in your movie, but probably he won't call me, he'll call Angelina Jolie. So, that's that. For us, the components are, you look at the genre, you look at, for us, we do a lot of due diligence in terms of comps. As much as people don't like to compare movies to, movies are their own beast as they're told. They have their own storylines, but they all follow trend. The trends are important in the marketplace. If you made the 500th vampire movie after Twilight, you're probably not going to make money. But if you had made a fantastic vampire movie when Twilight was coming out, you'd probably make a lot of money, because the market was ready to be told more vampire stories. So just as an example. So from our perspective, the components that we overall want to look at is this something that the global audience would want to see? Is this, for my company, the big model is, does it thrill, does it excite, or can it provoke? If it can do one of those three things, you probably have my attention.
Great, Abhi, thank you. I'm going to be unpredictable here and not just go through up and down. I'm just going to pick Sherman from Salt Media. Sherman very much has a corporate finance and investment background, in some ways similar to mine from in my past life. I understand, of course, that with that kind of background, the approach to investment, especially in stable industries, is something that you're used to. And now you're in the crazy world of filmmaking. How do you apply what you know, what you've learned, what you've experienced, what you've been trained to do in a place as crazy and full of, quicksand and strange things? How do you rationalize it and apply a model to make it work for you as an investor?
Well, crazy is an understatement. I've given up trying to understand a lot of things here, but some principles are the same. I think in investing, I still have I still have another hat that we still look at companies around the world for investments and stuff like that, and we bring them through a process of business development, growth, and all that. So the constant, however, I think is people. I think pretty much when you're putting money in a project, you're putting money in distribution. I think you're also putting money in the person behind it and the people behind it. So I think that's very, very important. For us, a little bit different from Abhi in the sense that he starts with the process of rejection first. For us, because of our mandate and what we're set out to do, we kind of look for then good projects, good messaging, and so we're very focused in what we do, and then we help these guys who have that great stories, that great messaging, and then try to bring that up and use whatever we have to make it possible. And of course, we work with partners around. I don't like to do things myself. I like to collaborate. We do things a lot with Justin, with Aurora, Jinka, and all of them. Now, increasingly, hopefully, with the rest of the guys on the panel. But I think the constant, as I mentioned, is people and it's discipline. Right, I think if you don't have discipline, it's difficult in investing. Actually, in any part of our lives, I don't see anyone that's successful that has not had discipline in his life. So the same way when we put money into the projects, there's a discipline of budget, there's a discipline of the investment exposure, there's a discipline of risk management, mitigation, there's a discipline also of really selection, right? And you see something that you think it could be, but do you move out of that boundary? So I think those are the constants, whether in media space or in a brick and mortar world or any traditional investment discipline.
I just want to add to what you said. I mean, we like to show the veneer that, in the other industries it's more stable, like telecoms or of financial services and so forth. The reality is that it's actually not. It's still scary, right? It is scary because there are still things that can go wrong in predictable, supposedly, or traditional investment pockets, right?
Yeah, and I think what Abid spoke was very true. I mean, you don't lose money. First thing, never lose money. Just make sure you've got your $1 back on your $1 investment. I mean, then we figure the rest out because the rest is really, really unknown.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That's true. Martin, what is your take on all this?
Well, I think you can overcomplicate this
Okay,
business.
just-
It is essentially project financing, albeit a very esoteric form of project financing to some extent. But the sort of common disciplines to all of that, So it involves parts of a budget to be financed which are collateralized, parts where you can make comfortable assumptions about future collateral value, and then there is an investor who may look at it from the perspective of taking ownership of the film. So basically, in Banksy terms, we're looking at senior debt, junior debt, gap, and equity. So it's not too different from other forms of project finance. I think where the problem is in this business, it becomes too bitty. There's a multiplicity of partners involved in the finance, which can suck the lifeblood out of you and probably add about 10% to the cost of the budget of the film in bun fight for lawyers and all the rest of it. So the answer really is to keep it as simple as possible. The ideal is to have an investor who can put up 100% of the budget and park it straight with the completion guarantor. And then we have the cynical sort of talent agents who know that the film is real, it can be made, and can advise their talent accordingly. The second best option would be to have at least the equity putting up the money, but in the meantime, all the collateral would have to have been raised. Not all of the collateral, but for doing a medium-range budget of $7.5 to $10 million, you really need to have it pre-collateralized to the extent of about 65–70%. Otherwise, who would put their money in, and who should put their money in?
Martin, just for the edification of the audience, do you as London Pacific Finance, are you an investor or are you a financier in a debt scenario? Or, yeah.
We come from I come from a banking background, so I'm sort of gamekeeper turned poacher, I suppose. But my colleague was in the US is more the production side. So we structure and develop and produce now films for which we own and have developed.
Okay, thank you. Justin, just your thoughts as MD of Aurora and also as part of Sava and everything else. What do you think would be a viable business model when it comes to financing projects like for film and television and so forth?
I think the big change in how people look at the perspective of how people look at things over the last few years has changed because, especially in this part of the world in Southeast Asia, I imagine a lot of people look at the media entertainment industry, or at least the films that we do, or films in general as we do, as cultural products. Things that you get the financing from friends, family, government grants. You cobble together the financing from as many places as possible. But one of the big perspective changes is to start looking at films as actual asset classes. Once you start thinking about the films that you make or the TV shows that you make as asset classes, there's something in you that usually clicks, where you kind of understand, okay, this is how I assemble the financing for this asset class, this is how I make the money back. It's really all about attitude, and I think that's one of the big changes that we see growing in this region within producers and filmmakers, that they're starting to understand that there is that business attached to this whole show business thing that is being seriously undervalued and underlooked at. And once that happens, understanding how to put together financing plans that are more sophisticated and how to approach that and how to actually bring that to financiers that aren't even film financiers. You bring it to banks, you bring it to investment houses, you speak the same language that they do, because you are approaching what you are doing as an asset class. That's the big change. I think that's a kind of business model that it's actually very simple to do. It's not. You don't need to have an MBA to structure big things like this. You just need to have a sort of understanding that what you're doing is something that is an investable grade asset that people could put money into, and how they get the money back. That's really as simple as it can come. Yeah.
I think I want to add to what Justin said. I mean, some of us here are also producers as well as investors, financiers, and one of the things that we've come to realize is that many producers out there, when they come and approach an investor, they haven't taken the effort to understand the language that the investor speaks. So we need to do our homework as producers to meet them halfway. You can't just walk in and say, here's my script, here's my proof of concept trailer, it's the coolest film ever. You can't. They hear this all the time, So we have, the one that really gets our attention usually is when they realize, hey, they've done their homework. They've thought about the value of their film from a rational market perspective. They've thought about even things like P&A and marketing. They thought about, how am I going to help my investor get his money back or her money back? Even if they're not correct, at least the effort is appreciated. Then right? And at least you go, these guys made the effort.
I think one way to think about it is that as a filmmaker, you are, and some of you guys know this, you're a filmmaker, you're a serial entrepreneur. Every film that you make is an enterprise, it's a business of its own. If it's own accounting practices, you hire your own crew, you have your own human resource exercises within one film or one project. If you look at films in that kind of level, you understand that you are running businesses, you are running something that has audits, and accounts at the end of the day. So when you look at things like this, you start to have and it ties back to what even Sherman said about bringing discipline into things, because you are bringing discipline into your filmmaking practice. And once an investor sees that, or they start realizing, okay, this person actually knows what he's doing, he's having this practice across 2 or 3 films, that means his production company, for example, is solid and secure. I see the returns, they are transparent. I know how much he's going to make next year as well, because he has probably an output deal with a regular buyer that's always buying his film. He has a deal with a vendor that's giving him a good price every year for every film that he does. And there's a predictability that comes about your company. And once you have that, who knows, you may, instead of having an investor that comes in per film and you're looking for an investor every film, he might just find a way to invest into your entire company as well. And then you have a long-term strategy in there. Once you have a long-term strategy, you can build more verticals in your company. You world production, you can go into distribution. From distribution, who knows where else you can go. You may even start your own financing unit as well. So it's very much a strategical kind of way of looking at things, and it all comes down to how you look at even one film. Yeah.
If I may just chime in, in my world of the hedge funds, the private equity guys, and you see the numbers are huge, right? Hundreds of millions, billions, and one of the key reasons why, aside from good marketing, okay, is the fact that they're able to give something called governance, and accountability, right? And that's where I think the media industry as a whole has a lot to grow, and could and should grow. Because if you want to attract funding, if you don't want to have to go chase money all the time, come to a film market, be pitching like crazy to 30 people and then get rejected by all 30, it's this thing that we have that ability to give investors the confidence, that with every dollar that you're putting with me, be assured that I'm not taking it for granted. I think every investor or every financier would really, really appreciate that, and like Leon said, it'll set you apart. And again, back to the point about is people, right? Like Justin said, if as a financier, if I see your discipline in 1 and 2 projects, the 3rd project you don't really have to pitch to me too hard, to be honest, because you can be sure I'm pretty much ready to write the check. So I think if we have that broader perspective, and bring back to the foundational part of how we operate and the attitude towards how we treat investment or investment into our projects, then I think it would set you apart. Number 1, number 2, it will build something for you. Now, of course, not all of you are producers. Some of you are directors. You're more the creative guys. But the principle applies the same, right? I mean, in a company, you have a CEO kind of type person. You also have your technology guy who probably can't tell what's left on the balance sheet and what's right on the balance sheet, right? So, but the guy's really good on technology, so he's the CTO, for example, or he's the idea. But he finds that business person, right? So parallels are all there. And I think if we can learn a little bit, of course I'm biased here, right? But if you can learn a little bit of that discipline from the financial space, because it is show business is 80% business, 20% show, right? I mean, if you don't already realize, it is the case, okay? So, so if we can bring that, I think it will shift the industry a lot. It will shift your life a lot in terms of making films.
That's great. That's what I wanted to say too. That if you guys don't have, as creative people and all that, you don't have the training or the experience, get someone to partner with you to do that. It's just
Look for Justin.
Yeah, look for Justin. Yeah.
Well, if you
Yeah,
mind,
so I'm going to ask you, Abi, what are your thoughts on what we've discussed? And your experience. Have you found people like this who've met you halfway?
Sure. I mean, I think by the very nature of the business, by the filmmaker, by the producers, as just said, everybody's an entrepreneur, everybody's running their own startup as a film. Everybody's programmed and designed for success. Everybody's looking for the next big hit. Everybody's planning the metrics and the numbers on multiples of 10 and 20. What I would encourage the filmmaking community, in fact, is to say, as Muhammad Ali would have said better, everybody has a plan until you get the first punch in the face. So my question is more about what happens if it's not a success? Let's discuss that. In your presentation deck, 25 slides talk about how this movie could be the next slam dunk, which is what it should be. That's what your vision is. But I want to see a couple of slides of say what it wasn't. So how can still the capital be recouped? What can happen? It's no far different. And I mean, I'll bring it down to a very simple example. If I was to put my house on sale, a question I would ask my real estate agent, I understand the pricing for going houses around this range, but what if we didn't get the offer? What kind of offer? What's the worst case scenario for us? How would we live? I think that passing on the risk mitigation and risk management to your sales agent and to your distributor and having them accountable to your producer is not a very good fiscal policy. I think as a producer, as a filmmaker, I mean, if the film was successful, your families benefit, everybody benefits, the entire value chain benefits. So it's just only right that the responsibility of being fiscally prudent and careful is passed along. And risk mitigation, it's not a bad thing to plan for failure. It's actually a good thing because it makes you much more clearer towards your vision of why this film could fail. And if you can check some of those boxes, you might target yourself towards a much higher return.
I agree with you. In fact, I apply this myself, not just to filmmaking, but to anything even before. If I run the worst case scenario and I can live with that, then that's my base case. You know what I mean? Everything is gravy after that.
Well, that's why I said one of the things is to look at your project not just as a work of art or something that you've put your sweat, blood, and tears into, but as an asset class as well. Because once you do that, there's a valuation tagged onto it. And knowing that valuation gives you an idea of how much it's worth. And once you know how much it's worth, you know what you can recoup out of it, even if it's not selling as well as it thought. So there's always a minimum sale value to everything. Every content has a minimum sale value. Some guy in Ukraine would buy your film for $500 to air it at night one day. So you'll never get zero on anything that you do. It's just how many of these sales can you put together, stitch together to make your minimum sale value. So knowing how much you can collateralize as little as possible from your thing, there you have your minimum sale value, you know how much your risk really is at the end of the day. Knowing that gives you that confidence to go out there, raise money. And the one thing about the film industry that's great is that, unlike tech or pharmaceuticals, your IP, for example, if you get into tech and let's say, it crashes and burns you, the investor gets zero out of it. There's nothing left, maybe the computers that you use to run the programming on it. But with film, you'll never ever get a zero on any film unless during production itself, the whole thing burns to the ground, So knowing how your film is worth, working with a distributor on knowing your minimum sale value is a very important first step into going out there into the market and having the confidence to sell at certain prices.
Martin, your thoughts, please.
Well, I think with single picture financing, the risk of failure, and when failure comes along, there's not too many places you can go, actually. I mean, it's like when you sell your house and you don't get the right price. I mean, your house is worth as much as anyone will buy. Sure. And the same is true of a film. Sure. And that can rapidly deteriorate in value as well. I think the trick is probably, if at all possible, to have a portfolio of projects to be financed. Therefore, you can cross-collateralize the benefits of that if you have the same production entities, the same investors. Sure. So, if you go down on one, you can go up on another. There will always be shortfalls in certain projects, But the only way to approach it is by a portfolio effect. But going back to risk mitigation, I think a lot of the hedge funds that are coming in, you see a lot of the same faces doing film financing, but behind them are different entities. But they do have this discipline which they impose on people. So they, statement of the obvious, they want to see that the picture is bonded, They want to see that there's a media savvy lawyer doing it. They want to see that there are pre-sales in place and the adherence to the tax code has all been done. So they will build in these little conditions into giving. So there is a discipline there which people follow. But again, really it has to be done on a portfolio basis rather than single picture.
No, I agree. In fact, the whole concept of back in Malaysia, when government and private sector tried to figure out a way to invest in the industry, they started out with single picture projects. And that was horrific. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket and hoping that it makes $1 billion. It's not going to happen. So somewhere along the middle of this journey, they wised up to realize we should invest in slates of films. So suddenly I guess the financial sector started to understand this, because a portfolio of films is a little bit like a portfolio of stocks, isn't it? Some stocks will be crap, some will break even, and some will pay for all the cost of the entire slate and portfolio and then some. So the idea of managing a portfolio of films or intellectual property related to films and television is a good way to go. So maybe an idea for producers would be think about 4 or 5 films, line them up together, make them as good as possible with the discipline that Sherman mentioned, with an eye for commercialization that Justin mentioned, and with the sense of what's the best case or the worst case scenario that Abi mentioned. Run it up as a slate and say, look, the possible internal rate of return is this much for 5 or 6 films. And
it's all been ramped up now. There's slate of slates even. So you do things, a slate of films within Indonesia, you do a slate of films within Philippines, you do a slate of films in Malaysia, and then you cross-collateralize them through the whole region as well, because you have one distribution stores through the region. That's the strong importance of consolidating and bringing together strong distribution elements within a region, because once you do that, you can find that backbone of distribution within all these big slates. Yeah.
And one of the things that I do want to add on to is that, I think what's very exciting right now is as these independent movies are being packaged, and the talent is a constant conversation. Everybody knows the A+ talent and the numbers that go with it. But what I personally get quite frustrated with it is the presentations that continue to come with the only 2 sheets you always get, one from Box Office Mojo and one from IMDb Pro, which is, to me, just doesn't make sense. If Full Screen can figure out that YouTube videos are worth $500 million to Disney, I'm sure the talent that you guys are tracking, the talent that you want, do some math behind those metrics, what those metrics look like. That information is readily available. That data can transform into value. I'm recently putting a movie together right now which has a couple of stars that all the filmmaker proposed to me was, these couple of stars get 20 million streams, it's 10% of that, and if I could just sell the movie on iTunes, I'll probably make 5 times the money. That was the only pitch it was, and it's actually a very credible pitch. And I think it can be done. And I think for a movie like that, I'm asking myself, do I even need to go the traditional route? Do I even need to talk to distributors? I don't even think I need to talk to pay TV channels. Maybe should I talk to Facebook? Should I talk to Snapchat? So that just opens up, and I'm considering the panel we are about new business models. I think it's no longer just a distributor, a film is made, a distributor buys it, who sells it to a TV channel, and the money trickles down. Now it's open game.
Or you just put the onus on something like YouTube Red for them to go and sell to their brands and all that, and you just get them to give you a license fee.
That would be even fun.
Yeah.
So I think in a way that there is a rationale to this madness, in putting financing into films. And I just want to, before I open this up to the floor, I just want to share an anecdote. My late producer partner, Greg Coote, years ago, he worked with Dune Capital to form Dune Entertainment, which ended up financing 1/3 of all 20th Century Fox films, which included films like X-Men and Avatar and 127 Hours and so forth. And the pitch he made to this New York hedge fund, Dune Capital, was that this is one of the few industries in the world where you get back multiples of your investment if you plan it right. give you an example. This year alone, a film called Get Out, which is a small horror film, was made for less than $5 million US and made global box office of 200 million. These are the kind of metrics you never see in many industries, supposedly very predictable industries. And it's why sometimes the hedge funds step out of the comfort zone and say, let's put a chunk of what we've got and play this game and hope to get a few hits and run a portfolio at the same time, right? So take heart, guys. There's rational in the madness. And there are, see, these investors here, they can invest in anything, in any industry. But 50% of the battle in their minds have already been won because they want to be in this industry. They want to go on the roller coaster ride. They want to, right? So you're not meeting a bunch of faceless bankers. You're meeting with people who are actually passionate about the industry, very much like you. They're just not in the creative space. They may be creative, but they are playing a role that is not in your role. They're trying to meet you halfway. So there is light at the end of this tunnel. Believe me, I know. It's crazy, but it's there. Okay, let's open it up to the floor. Anyone wants to start the ball rolling? My goodness, you have financiers and investors sitting out here wanting to give you money, and I have no questions. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Hi, guys. Thank you for spending your time with us. So for someone who has, let's say, an example, they have a slate of 6 films, feature-length films in Vietnam. What sort of finance structuring do you do, whether it's onshore, offshore? How do you feel most comfortable that you're going to be able to remit your capital back if you invest in some place like Vietnam or Cambodia?
Are these films meant for global audiences or for domestic?
Domestic.
Justin?
My first strategy would be finding out what are the other partners that you have on board. Would that be the cinemas? Would that be the local distributors? Finding out how exactly are they giving you the money? Are they giving it to you in tranches, or are they giving it in one whole sum, or are they giving it to you at the very end of the delivery? And if I know they're giving it to the very end of the delivery, I may look at a loan option. So I could factor certain things and get interest out of it, and it really depends. Or I may come in as part of the equity financing deal. But for me, it's looking at if you're really doing a local deal. For me, it's the most important thing is figuring out your local distribution, because if you don't have local distribution and you're trying to do a local film, it's like, I think what someone mentioned in the last panel, like, who makes a film without knowing where it's going to go, right? So it's the same thing, local film, especially if your experience is not selling local film and you're just brokering certain deals. For me, the comfort level is knowing that there is local distribution and knowing how much. We try to get a sales estimate of that. If we can't get a sales estimate of that, or if we do, we always try to come in for about 20-30% less than what the estimate is to keep ourselves safe. But a lot of it would be looking at how we can help you cash flow as much as possible. Or the second option after doing that is looking at the film, looking at the actual content, figuring out if there's a market for it outside of the local market, and maybe you'll just buy out your global rights for a set amount. And we'll do the distribution on it, we'll monetize it, we'll make our money from the rest of the world.
Thanks, Justin. Anyone else have any thoughts to share in this question?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a brilliant question, considering, I think one of the things that I do want to stress is it's a domino. And as Justin said, this is where exactly I would love to take the baton from him and then run forward. So one of the factors I would look into it is, if you're making 6 movies in Vietnam, what kind of genre are you looking at? Are you looking at a genre that tends to travel? If you're making 6 art house movies, there'll be a lot of acclaim, potential short, but overseas revenue is limited, not phenomenal. If you're making local movies that are genre movies, that will travel, because genre movies can travel really well across. One of the things to do is, once you've got your local distribution figured out, that's extremely important, because it's very hard for me to tell HBO you should buy 6 movies that nobody in Vietnam knew about. It's a little bit hard to convince somebody. But if I can convince them, then it becomes a simple structure where, as Justin said, 20, 30 from him, we probably look at the numbers and we project, okay, perhaps there's an X factor market for us, and we probably come in for a certain amount, and that's a chain, that's a domino that starts to come together, where an ideal deal would be, you've got 6 pictures that have a locked distribution in the local marketplace, you've got capital partners that are supporting that initiative, you've got international distribution locked in with the partners who are going to make sure these movies are pumped out. And what's amazing about the 6-film slate is, as the first film will make good money if it works out, but if the slate starts to perform, the 4, 5, and 6 film will have the halo effect of the first, second, and third film that you created. So overall, it can be a good piece of business.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, Marcus Lim here. Just wanted to ask a question. There's been a bit of talk about YouTube Red, Netflix, that kind of thing. Looking at it from a filmmaker's point of view, what is the value proposition of selling all rights to one of these platforms and perhaps getting lost within that platform? I mean, bear in mind that, say, a filmmaker has a different motivation for getting his film out into the marketplace, to get a name out.
For me, I had this conversation before. It's very much filmmaker to filmmaker because it happens overseas. You know, Netflix and Amazon, they're very aggressive in India. They work even with the big boys and the big production companies. But these, a lot of the production companies are happy with a 20-25% overhead on just producing and selling. It's a factory to them. But for them, it's a brand builder, first of all. They get to do higher production budgets. So doing one project with Amazon is equivalent to doing 6 months' work for anybody else. So, but at the end of the day, they don't really own anything at the end of the day because these big studios come in, they take all the rights to monetize outside. But it's also no different from what it's like for a lot of, in the US, negative pickups have been around for as long as we can remember. So people have been doing it. It's just the onus has always been, negative pickups is okay because the onus has always been then on the producer to produce something on the budget and making sure that the quality exceeds that looking from the budget. So you do something for $1 million, as long as it looks for $5 million, you can sell it for $5 million to whoever wants to buy it. But with a commission deal from Netflix or Amazon, you are limited in scope to how much your overheads would be. So I don't really think it's the best deal moving forward, but it helps with the financing. You don't have to spend 1 year looking to put the pieces together. You just need to go into one office, convince that one person, and get that one person's approval, as opposed to the traditional model where you have to get 3 or 4 different people to say yes, and then when you even want to go do theatrical, every theatrical distributor or exhibitor will have a say on changing this and changing that. So it all becomes a matter of bandwidth and time. That's one of the reasons I see a lot of production companies and strong filmmakers just wanting to deal with one creative or one suit. They don't want to deal with multiple suits. But if, let's say, you have the option of putting together projects from a strong financing ground, independently putting it together, then I would have to say that whoever's doing your producing or whoever your producer is, if I'm talking to filmmakers here, be sure that that person is able to, who knows how to sell and knows how to monetize for you, because the long tail is where your real benefit is. But if you don't see that long tail happening with a certain producer or distributor, then maybe putting your eggs into the Netflix or commissioning basket might be the best route for that filmmaker.
Martin?
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, Netflix is a studio, the virtual studio, call them what you like, but would you turn down a deal from Sony or whoever, a big studio, if they're Disney, if they came along and said, we'll buy all of your film and give you a bit on top as well, you know, depending on how big the bit on top is, of course. But no, you would be foolish to turn that down. The only problem is if you've made some deals in the meantime with distributors, you might have to unwind those, and that may cause you a few problems, of course, you know. But then if you get into the rut of doing more and more for Netflix, they become almost like the commissioning producer for these films. But no, I think, especially from the investor's point of view, put money into it, they'd probably look very strangely at you if you decided to turn down a deal like that, I think. You know.
Well, I would love to add on to this, because this is a problem I have been dealing with for the past 4 years, because I have some very good movies that ended up in a very terrible deals with Netflix and Amazon, and I have some very terrible movies that somehow got involved, that got saved by Netflix or Amazon, and somewhere in between. I think that moving forward, my plan, what I see is the movie business is going to go the business of the music, Spotify future. I think you can say 2 or 3 or 4 years, but eventually the artists have to start getting paid for on a stream basis. A complete buyout will not work. But for filmmakers, you want to get the bang, you want to get the noise, you want to get the word out there. You have to look for opportunities where 125% markup on your budget is a great idea from a financing perspective, and you should take it. But be very, you have to work a bit harder. The business, what I would say, and a lot of people tend to not realize this, is the business used to be 10 years ago, and that's when I was a baby agent, I call myself. You made a movie for $1, and you had a negative pickup for $1.20 or $1.40. Everybody made some money, and you went back and did it again. Now the business is you make a movie for $1, so you now have the negative pickup. It's not Disney, it's not Universal, it's not Sony, it's Netflix and it's Amazon. But there's also a second level of the business where you can sell your movie 20 places at 5 cents to 10 cents over a period of time. So the question is, are you willing to take the pain? And I think so for me, sometimes it's profit versus pain. And I think which one do you need sooner, or how much can you sustain? That's all.
Yeah, I mean, with us, it's the same thing. Even from a financing perspective, we take different deals. So I take certain loan deals and with interest rates attached because I know it's a predictable thing. In a certain amount of months, I'm going to get the money back. And I know it's capped at a certain amount of upside. But we take equity positions in other films because we know the upside is higher. We know, we want to get a taste of the reward as well. So it's about balancing your portfolio, not including even your slate deals. You can make certain deals with certain financiers in a certain structure, but maybe in another film in your slate, you can change the structure a little bit more. So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't, that once you're locked into a certain structure, that's the same. It's about some creative flexibility, financial flexibility, and the producer side, knowing how, and one of the most important things producers need to know is understanding rights, meaning that your own territory rights, knowing how to break up those rights, because once you know how to break up those rights, you can customize different deal terms with different buyers and different financiers as well. And once you have that customizable option, it gives you a lot of flexibility moving forward as a producer. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi guys, thank you so much for spending your time with us. I work at a digital entertainment startup in India. We're VC backed. A very interesting model, sort of a hybrid that we've been able to come up with in the Indian market especially, is raising finance from brands for creating content. And this isn't AFP type content. It's basically just a web series or a short film for the internet where the brand's been given some placement in the story. The scale of these deals have been anywhere between $200,000 to about $1.5 million, $2 million. So brands are getting serious about investing in entertainment. Is this a model that you see getting replicated elsewhere? And if yes, what would be the pros and cons of such a model?
Well, I actually know of one. In Cambodia, there was a film called Jailbreak, and it was a martial arts film, and is currently Cambodia's biggest box office hit for a local film. A substantial amount of that budget was actually done through sponsorships. And I would say it happens, especially when the budget's maybe low enough in a way, maybe, and somehow the sponsorships, the quantum of the sponsorships just cover a substantial part of the budget if you're lucky enough. I'm not sure if it's sustainable though, as a model.
I can speak to it because I have been quite in the trenches, understanding the space for a while. So, Red Bull paid for somebody to go up to almost out of the Earth's ecosystem and jump, and paid millions of dollars. So branded content is going global. Brands coming to do films is very specific. So I think the question that you have is, I think it varies for the product that you're talking about. Branded content for web series is going to go like fire because that's Facebook, that's Snapchat, that's already happening. That's a $20 billion ecosystem now that big conglomerates, telcos are fighting and technology companies are fighting. Brands for television series is happening already. You've got brands that, the P&Gs of the world and so on, starting to get involved with daytime dramas and so on because they know the household income. They know who's making the decision in the household is usually, the women in the household. They want to appeal to that. They're doing that already. Films as branded content is a very unique space. I'm looking at a deal right now that I'm putting together. I'm taking it even further. I'm distributing a movie right now that I'm releasing out in Canada, which most of the P&A is going to be supported by a beer company that's local, that really wants to push it out there, and the movie just appeals to a certain demographic that the beer company wants to approve, and then we approach them to put the P&A out, and that's what they're going to do. So how scalable that is going to be a decision that's not, unfortunately, on the creative community side. It's scalable. It's the decision on the brand side. Marriott is spending a lot of money right now in doing branded content. Some of it could be films. Some of it would be television series. So
I think one of the more important things that you need to add when you bring brands into the picture, because we work with brand media agencies a lot who are always looking for new media spaces to put their brands in, whether or not it's TV or movies or whatever. But the one big thing that they all look for is the data element in everything. So if you are thinking about moving into this space seriously and pitching to brands seriously, you need to have a strong data element there. You need to know very strongly who their demographics are. You need to know how to bring out the data from all these things, so the platform is going to be, so everybody talks about content is king. If you're going around this route, the platform is going to be king, and I guess your content is going to be prints or whatever, but it's how it's going to be looking down the line if you're going to work with brands. So knowing your data is the key towards working with brands.
Guys, can we have one more question? Time's up. What do you think? Yeah, just one more question over there.
Hi. So as a financer and from a monetization perspective, how do you pick a winner film? Because I'm sure you guys come across a lot of great writing, a lot of passionate filmmakers, trying to pitch their products to you. So what is that X factor? What is that edge? Definitely it would be the subject and the content and the vision of the filmmaker, but what is it that you look for when you are picking a winner?
You don't. Yeah, I think you protect as much of the downside. The upside will look after itself. As long as you protect your downside, that's the best you can do. If it's a winner, it's a winner. You obviously think it's going to be a winner. Everyone thinks a film's going to be a winner, but you never know. You just batten down the hatches and make sure you're not going to lose any money. If it's a breakout, everyone's a winner. Great.
One of my partner, Greg Hood, used to say, never fall in love with your projects. That sounds like a cruel thing to say, especially from a producer to another, but I knew what he was trying to say. He was basically saying that as much as you're passionate about your projects or even your slate, always remember that whoever puts in money needs to get the money back. So you may have to put aside your passion projects and work on the other projects that will give you the credibility at first so that you can move on to do something that you could truly love. But that said, as for the panel here, and I would understand this, I don't think they're really going to look at the project per se because of how passionate you are, but more so how viable this project is in terms of being able to be an investable project, right? Well, and somewhere along the line, though, you will fall in love with it, I'm sure.
It's still ending on a positive note. Not everything is, we're not in the widgets business, so we're not, not everything is product widget. But I would say one thing that I highly suggest, it's just something fresh and different. Something as fresh and different. I'll give you an example. I'm putting a movie together with a filmmaker who's 22 years old, who's never directed a film, and his video reel that he made from a $3,000 camera is India in 2020, so 2050 or something, futuristic. It's RoboCop meets District 9. It's like, how could you not? So for me, it's about fresh idea, something daring. Yeah.
Justin or Sherman?
I think it's also, I mean, just to end it off, it's really how much thought the filmmakers put into it. I mean, it's not just throwing up an idea in fantasy, but, you know, what's realistic and what's achievable. I mean, of course, you know, you can go one end and say this is a $20 million budget project, it's got everything else that will make it a success. And, you know, it's going to be, I mean, that remains to be seen. Then you can also go down to something like, okay, I'll do something like $500,000 with these grand plans. And you know that's not achievable with $500,000 as well, which means to say that the filmmaker has not put thought to the entire process, and something that we don't like. I think everyone agrees with me, is that, you know, you've got to do your testing, you got to do your groundwork, you got to make sure that whatever you say is bankable. I think that's one very, very key thing, because I mean, like Leon put across just now, I mean, we do see a lot of projects every week, probably on a weekly basis, you know, and over time you just kind of know, right? So yeah.
Jason?
Well, a lot like what Martin said, all we can do is de-risk ourselves as much as possible. I think if you were there for the Meet the Financing panel, one of my partners talked about all the checklists that he's going through. If you hit as much of the checklist as possible, you're already there, but really the secret sauce, the X factor at the end of the day, it's really what you see in the filmmaker. And very importantly, that I always say, it's easy to find a good deal. It's actually easy to find a good deal. It's finding the right partner and a good partner. That's the most difficult thing you can find in this business. Someone you can work with, not just in one film, but 2 films, 3 films, 4 films. So the moment you find someone that you can work with, or a filmmaker that you can work with and sort of sings with you, you want to work with them more than one film. You know, it's that hard to find someone good. So yeah, if you are a filmmaker working with a producer, please try to make it easy for that producer. You'll find in the long run that relationship actually will grow you not just one flower, but you'll grow you a garden. Yeah.
That's a great statement to wrap up today's session. So thanks, guys, for coming. And yeah, our panelists will be hanging around for a bit. I'm sure you want to pounce on them. So thanks again. Thank you very much.